In this video, we will be learning about some of the basics for graphing inequalities and also how to write interval notation. Make sure that for any inequality problem that the variable is always on the left-hand side of the equals or the inequality symbol, just like we're normally used to writing it. But this will all make sense as long as the variable is on the left-hand side. Okay, so let's just talk about the different types of inequality symbols. So the first symbol is a greater than symbol. Notice greater than symbols are pointing to the right. If it's just a greater than symbol, you would use an open circle on a number line to graph it, and then you would always shade to the right anytime it's greater than. So I just remember that as it's pointing to the right, so always shade to the right. The greater than or equal to symbol looks the same, except there's a line underneath the greater than symbol that stands for greater than or equal to. Anytime it has an equal bar under it, we used a closed circle to graph on a number line. And again, you're going to shade to the right. The less than symbol is pointing in the opposite direction. So notice it's pointing to the left. If it's just a less than symbol, we use an open circle on a number line. And then we always shade to the left for less than. Less than or equal to, same thing, just put the equal bar under it, except this one's going to be a closed dot because it has that equal bar. And again, you're going to shade to the left. So let's just practice a few easy graphing examples just to kind of get the hang of what type of circle to use and how to shade it. So if I'm graphing x is greater than -5, that would be an open circle on -5 and greater than is shaded to the right. So any number to the right would make that inequality true. For x is less than or equal to -2, you're going to do a closed circle on, +2, closed circle on +2. And then for less than, you're going to shade everything to the left with an arrow because it would go on forever. So basically that means that any number in the shaded area would make that inequality true. For x is less than 5, it's going to be an open circle on +5, shaded to the left with an arrow. For x is greater than or equal to -3, it's going to be a closed circle on -3 and everything shaded to the right with an arrow. Now, number 5 is a little bit different because the variable is on the wrong side. So anytime the variable is on the wrong side, you need to move it. So we need to move the x to the left-hand side. And once we move it, we need to flip the sign with it. So now it's going to become a less than or equal to. So this inequality above is the same thing as x is less than or equal to 0. So you would need a closed circle on 0 and then everything shaded to the left with an arrow. Okay, so hopefully now you have the hang of graphing. Now we're going to talk about something called interval notation. So interval notation shows the farthest to the furthest left value and the farthest right value of the shaded section on a number line. So it kind of explains the shading of your number line. So anytime you have an open circle with a number, we're going to use parentheses for interval notation. Anytime you have a closed circle with a number, we're going to use brackets. And then if there's an arrow that's pointing forever to the left is towards -infinity. And if there's an arrow pointing to the right, forever to the right is towards +infinity. So if we look at these two graphs, we can determine their interval notation just by looking at them. So we always start with how far to the left the graph is going. So it stops at -4. And then since that's an open circle, we're going to put parentheses around the -4. And then it's going forever to the right. So forever to the right is towards +infinity. And we always use parentheses with infinity symbols. For example 7, we look at how far to the left the graph is going. It's going forever to the left, so that's towards -infinity. And again, we always use parentheses with infinity symbols. And then how far to the right is the graph going? It's stopping at +4. And since it's a closed circle, we're going to put a bracket around the +4. So let's flip to the back of these notes and try a few more examples because this is going to be very similar to what you'll see in the homework. So for each of these, we are going to graph the inequality and then write the appropriate interval notation. So for x is less than or equal to -1, that would be a closed circle on -1, and then everything is going to be shaded to the left with an arrow. So the graph is going forever to the left, so that's towards negative infinity with a parenthesis, and then it's stopping at -1 to the right, and we're going to put a bracket around the -1 since it's a closed circle. In example 2, the issue with example 2 is x is on the wrong side. So we do need to move x to the left, and when we move it to the left, we need to make sure that we always flip the sign. So I'm going to now graph x is less than 8. So open circle on +8, and everything should be shaded to the left with an arrow. So it's going forever to the left, so again, towards negative infinity, and then it's going to +8. Since +8 is an open circle, we're going to use parentheses to represent that. Same thing with example 3, x is on the wrong side, so we have to move it to the left and then make sure we flip the sign. So now it's ready to graph. X is greater than or equal to 0 would be a closed dot on 0, and then greater than is shaded to the right with an arrow. So I'm going to put a bracket then around the 0 because it's a closed dot, and then it's going forever to the right, which is towards positive infinity, and then we would put a parenthesis around that. In example 4, it's going to be an open circle on +6, and since it's greater than, it's going to be shaded to the right with an arrow. So the interval notation would be parenthesis 6, comma, positive infinity with a parenthesis. Example 5, we're going to have a closed circle on -4, and it's less than, so everything is shaded to the left. So the interval notation would be from negative infinity to -4 with a bracket around the -4 since it's a closed circle. And then our very last example, example 6, again, x is on the wrong side, so we need to move x to the left and then flip the sign. So this is the same thing as x is greater than or equal to -5. So closed circle on -5, and then greater than is everything shaded to the right with an arrow. So for the interval notation, I'd have a bracket, -5, comma, positive infinity. So hopefully after completing these notes, you are now more familiar with how to graph inequalities on a number line and how to write their interval notation. Feel free to ask your teacher for any additional questions.